coffee cup slipped from Elias Ward's fingers. It shattered against the marble floor of his penthouse, dark liquid spreading like blood across white stone. He stared at the mess, unmoving. The housekeeper would clean it. Someone always cleaned up after him. That was the problem. He'd stopped doing anything himself, stopped feeling anything at all. 4 years. 4 years since the funeral. 4 years since the cameras had flashed, while he'd stood hollow-eyed beside a casket, the world watching his grief like it was entertainment. 4 years since he'd felt truly alive. Elias walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Manhattan sprawled below him, glittering and indifferent. He'd built an empire here. Tech innovations that changed industries. Investments that made billions. A life so bright it burned. And now? Now he was just a ghost haunting his own existence. His phone buzzed, another gala invitation, another charity board wanting his name, another journalist requesting an interview about moving forward and honoring her legacy. He silenced it without reading. That night, Elias made a decision. He called his assistant, gave 3 instructions: cancel everything, redirect the board, and find him a house somewhere small, somewhere quiet, somewhere no one would recognize the man who used to be Elias Ward. 2 weeks later, he stood in a cottage at the edge of a town called Millbrook, population 3,000. The real estate agent had assured him it was charming and peaceful. She'd been right. It was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. So empty he could disappear completely. And that was exactly what he wanted. The days bled together. Elias woke without purpose. He walked without destination. He existed without living. The cottage had 2 bedrooms he never entered, a kitchen where he barely cooked, and a living room where he sat in darkness, watching dust particles float through afternoon light. He wasn't suicidal. He just wasn't anything. 3 months into his self-imposed exile, Elias discovered the cafe. It sat on Main Street, wedged between a bookstore and a flower shop, with faded blue paint and a hand-painted sign that read Morning Brew. He'd walked past it dozens of times before finally stepping inside on a Tuesday morning when the loneliness felt particularly suffocating. The cafe was small, warm, and blessedly empty. An older man behind the counter nodded at him without curiosity. Elias ordered black coffee, paid cash, and sat in the corner farthest from the windows. The coffee was mediocre, the silence was perfect. He returned the next day and the day after that. Soon, it became routine, the only structure in his structureless life. Every morning at 7:30, he'd walk the 4 blocks to Morning Brew, order the same black coffee, sit in the same corner table, and stare at nothing until the cup was empty. The barista, whose name tag read Tom, eventually stopped asking if he wanted anything else. The few regulars who frequented the cafe learned not to approach the quiet man in the corner. Elias appreciated their indifference. In Manhattan, his presence had demanded attention. Here, he was invisible, forgettable, exactly what he wanted, until the morning his wallet wasn't in his pocket. Elias stood at the counter, patting his jacket with growing frustration. He checked every pocket twice. His wallet was gone, probably left on the cottage kitchen counter. The first time in months he'd forgotten something, and of course it had to be today when Tom had been replaced by a younger barista who didn't know him. "I'm sorry," Elias said, stepping back from the counter. "I'll come back later." "I've got it." The voice came from behind him, warm, soft, like honey dissolving in tea. Elias turned. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. A black woman in her early 30s with rich brown skin that glowed in the cafe's morning light. Her hair was gathered in a loose, natural puff that framed her face, and when she smiled, it reached her eyes, deep brown eyes that held genuine kindness, not pity. "It's just coffee," she said, already reaching for her wallet. "No big deal." "I can't let you," Elias started, but she was already handing cash to the barista. "Consider it a welcome to Millbrook gesture," she said. Her voice had a slight lilt to it, musical and unhurried. "You're new here, right? I've seen you around." Elias felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Surprise? Gratitude? Something deeper? Thank you. I'll pay you back." "Don't worry about it." She collected her own coffee, something complicated with foam art on top, and turned to leave, but she paused, looking back at him with that warm smile. "Enjoy your day." Then she was gone. Elias stood frozen, his coffee growing cold in his hands. He couldn't remember the last time someone had done something kind for him without wanting something in return. In his old life, every gesture had been transactional. networking, positioning, strategic relationship building. But this woman had simply helped. No agenda, no expectation. He realized he didn't even know her name. That night, Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He kept seeing her smile, hearing that warm voice, the way she'd said enjoy your day like she actually meant it, like she hoped his day would contain something worth enjoying. For the first time in 4 years, Elias felt something other than numbness. It wasn't happiness exactly, more like the memory of what happiness used to feel like. A tiny crack in the ice that had frozen around his heart. He told himself it meant nothing. She was just a kind stranger. He'd probably never see her again. But the next morning, he returned to the cafe at 7:30 sharp, and his eyes scanned the room before he'd even ordered. She wasn't there. He felt disappointment settle like a stone in his stomach. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Elias returned each day, ordering his black coffee, sitting in his corner, and trying not to watch the door. He told himself he was being ridiculous. He was a 42-year-old man acting like a teenager with a crush. But still, each morning, hope flickered when the bell above the door chimed, then died when it wasn't her. The following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after she'd paid for his coffee, she returned. Elias was at the counter when she walked in. He heard her before he saw her, that warm, musical laugh responding to something Tom said. When Elias turned, there she was, wearing a yellow sundress that made her skin glow, her hair in the same natural puff, her smile as radiant as he remembered. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by delight. "Wallet today?" she asked, walking up beside him. Elias felt his lips curve into what might have been a smile, the first genuine one in years. "Wallet today. I owe you a coffee. I told you not to worry about it. And I'm choosing to worry about it anyway." The words came easier than he expected. "Please, let me buy you a coffee or a muffin or—" He gestured vaguely at the pastry case. "Whatever makes us even." She laughed, and the sound did something to his chest, loosened something that had been clenched tight for so long. "All right, I'll take a blueberry scone, but only because they're really good here." They stood at the counter together, and Elias was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the subtle scent of cocoa butter, the way she hummed softly while deciding between coffee drinks, the warmth radiating from her like sunlight. "I'm Mara, by the way," she said as they waited for their orders. "Elias." He hesitated, then added, "And thank you again for last week. It really was nothing." Mara tilted her head, studying him with those kind eyes. "But you're welcome. You looked like you needed a small kindness that day." Had he looked that broken? That lost? Probably. He'd felt it. "Do you come here often?" Elias cringed internally at the cliché, but Mara just smiled. "A few times a week. It's my favorite place in town. Quiet, good coffee, good people." She glanced at him. "What about you? I've seen you here most mornings." "Every morning," Elias admitted. "I'm not great at breaking routines." "Nothing wrong with that. Routines can be comforting." The barista called their names, and Mara collected her latte and scone. "Well, Elias, enjoy your coffee. Maybe I'll see you around?" "Maybe," he said, though what he wanted to say was please or when or tomorrow. She left with a wave, and Elias watched her go, feeling that strange warmth in his chest again. It scared him. He'd built walls so high around his heart, and this woman had somehow slipped through a crack he hadn't known existed. But instead of running from the feeling, Elias found himself hoping she'd return. And she did. 2 days later, Mara was at the cafe when Elias arrived. She waved him over to her table, a small, 2-seater by the window, bathed in morning light. "Want to sit?" she asked. "I hate drinking coffee alone." Elias hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He collected his black coffee and sat across from her, feeling oddly nervous. When was the last time he'd had a real conversation with someone? When was the last time he'd wanted to? "So," Mara said, wrapping her hands around her mug, "what brings you to Millbrook? It's not exactly a metropolis." "That's why I'm here," Elias said carefully. "I needed quiet, space." "Running from something or towards something?" The question was gentle, not probing, but it hit close to home. "Maybe both, or neither. I'm not sure anymore." Mara nodded slowly. "I get that. I moved here 2 years ago for similar reasons. Sometimes you just need to press pause on life, you know? Figure out who you are when everything else gets stripped away." "Exactly." Elias felt understood in a way he hadn't in years. What did you find? When you pressed pause? That I'm stronger than I thought, and softer than I'd let myself be. Mara's smile turned bittersweet. I came here after a relationship that made me forget both those things. Millbrook gave me space to remember. There was a story there, pain carefully tucked away, wounds that had healed but left scars. Elias recognized it because he carried similar scars himself. I'm sorry, he said quietly, that someone made you forget your strength. I'm not. Not anymore. Mara met his eyes. Sometimes we need to break before we can rebuild ourselves better, stronger, more honest. They talked until their coffees went cold. Mara told him about her work as a freelance graphic designer, her love of painting, the little garden she'd started in her apartment's courtyard. Elias found himself sharing carefully edited pieces of his life, his love of architecture, his morning walks, the strange peace he'd found in Millbrook's slowness. He didn't mention Manhattan, didn't mention the empire he'd built, or the wife he'd lost, or the name that used to open doors and draw cameras. He was just Elias, a quiet man healing from unnamed wounds, and Mara seemed to accept that without question. When they finally stood to leave, Mara touched his arm lightly. Same time tomorrow? I'd like that, Elias said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised him. The next morning became a ritual, and the morning after that. Soon, Elias wasn't just coming to the cafe for coffee, he was coming for Mara, for her laugh that filled the space between them, for her stories about small-town life and the characters she'd met, for the way she listened when he spoke, really listened, like his words mattered. They graduated from coffee to walks. After their morning cafe meetings, they'd wander Millbrook's quiet streets together, talking about everything and nothing. Mara showed him her favorite spots, the second-hand bookstore with the grumpy cat, the park where she liked to sketch, the bakery that made bread so good it bordered on spiritual. With every walk, every conversation, Elias felt himself thawing. The numbness that had defined his existence for 4 years began to recede, replaced by something he'd forgotten how to name. Joy? Hope? Connection? One morning, 3 weeks after they'd first sat together, Mara said, "Tell me something real about you, Elias, something that hurts." They were sitting on a bench by the lake, watching early morning mist drift across the water. Elias's first instinct was to deflect, to change the subject, to protect the carefully constructed walls around his heart. But something in Mara's eyes, that gentle strength, that soft courage, made him want to be honest. "I lost someone," he said quietly. 4 years ago, my wife. Cancer." Mara's hand found his, warm and steady. "I'm so sorry. I thought I'd die with her, not physically, but in every way that mattered. And for a long time I did. I was just going through the motions, pretending to be alive." Elias stared at their joined hands. "Coming here was supposed to be about hiding. But then I met you, and I'm starting to remember what being alive actually feels like." "Elias." Mara's voice was soft with emotion. "I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable," he continued quickly. "I just want you to know what you've done for me. You've been so kind, so warm, when I didn't think I deserved kindness anymore. You've made me want to feel again." Mara squeezed his hand. "You deserve kindness. You deserve to heal, and I'm glad I could be part of that." She paused, then added, "For what it's worth, you've done something for me too. You've reminded me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that it's okay to let someone in again." "Your ex," Elias said. It wasn't a question. He was controlling, subtle about it at first, then less so. He made me feel small, made me question my worth, my judgment, my softness. By the time I left, I'd forgotten how to trust myself, trust others. Mara looked at him, eyes shining. "But you've shown me that gentlemen exist, that I can share space with someone without shrinking myself." They sat in silence, hands clasped, watching the sun burn away the morning mist. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of shared pain, shared healing, shared hope for something more. When Elias walked Mara home that day, he hesitated on her doorstep. She looked up at him, and the air felt charged with possibility. "Elias," she whispered. He cupped her face gently, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Mara leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed, and when their lips met, It felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. The kiss was soft, tentative, full of healing and hope. When they pulled apart, Mara was smiling, that radiant smile that had first cracked the ice around his heart. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he promised, and the day after, and the day after that. The weeks that followed were the happiest Elias had known in years. He and Mara fell into an easy rhythm. Morning coffee, long walks, afternoons where she painted while he read beside her, evenings cooking simple meals in her small apartment kitchen. Mara taught him to be present, to notice the small joys, the way light filtered through leaves, the satisfaction of a perfectly ripe peach, the comfort of silence shared with someone you love. She was gentle with his grief, never pushing him to move on or get over it, but simply making space for all of him, the broken parts and the healing parts alike. And Elias showed Mara she was worthy of a love that cherished her exactly as she was. He listened when she spoke, asked about her dreams, celebrated her victories, however small, made her feel seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. But beneath the joy, guilt gnawed at Elias, because he hadn't told her the truth. She didn't know about Manhattan, about Ward Technologies and the billions in his accounts and the life he'd walked away from. She didn't know his face had once been on magazine covers, that his wedding had been featured in the Times, that journalists still speculated about his whereabouts. She knew Elias the man, not Elias Ward the billionaire. At first he told himself it didn't matter. That part of his life was over, but as his feelings for Mara deepened, the lie, or rather the omission, grew heavier. What would she think when she learned the truth? Would she feel betrayed? Used? Would she understand why he'd hidden it? Or would she see it as proof that he didn't trust her? The guilt crystallized into fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of watching warmth turn to suspicion in those kind eyes. Fear that the best thing in his life would crumble the moment truth broke through. So Elias said nothing, and every day the secret grew larger. 2 months after their first kiss, Mara invited him to a local art show where she'd be displaying some paintings. Elias agreed immediately, proud and excited to see her work celebrated. But as they walked into the small gallery that evening, his stomach dropped. There, standing by the wine table, was someone from his old life. Richard Chen, an investor, a colleague, someone who'd been at his wedding and his wife's funeral, someone who would definitely recognize him. Elias froze. Richard hadn't seen him yet, was chatting with someone else, but it was only a matter of time. The gallery was small, intimate. "You okay?" Mara asked, noticing his sudden tension. I'm sorry, I just remembered something. Something urgent. I have to go." The words tumbled out, panicked and graceless. Hurt flashed across Mara's face. "Now?" "But the show just started." "I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Elias was already backing toward the door, keeping his face turned away from Richard. "I'll explain later, I promise. You're going to be amazing. I have to go." He fled before she could respond, hating himself with every step. That night, Elias sat in his dark cottage, phone in hand, staring at flights back to Manhattan. Maybe it was time to end this. Return to his real life before the secret destroyed them both. It would hurt, but wouldn't it hurt less than watching Mara's face when she discovered his lies? But he couldn't do it. Couldn't leave her. For better or worse, Elias had fallen in love with Mara Hayes, and the thought of a life without her felt like drowning. He'd have to tell her. Soon. He'd find the right moment and tell her everything. About his past, his name, his reason for hiding, and he'd pray she understood. But before he could find that courage, the decision was taken out of his hands. It started with a post on social media. Some tourist had snapped a photo in Millbrook, a street scene innocuous, but in the background, partially obscured, was a man who looked remarkably like the missing billionaire Elias Ward. The photo went viral. Tech blogs picked it up. Then business sites. Within 48 hours, Elias Ward, spotted in small town, was trending, and Millbrook was swarming with reporters and photographers hoping for confirmation. Elias knew it was over the moment he saw the first news van parked on Main Street. He stayed in his cottage, curtains drawn, while the storm gathered outside. His phone, the one he'd barely used in months, exploded with calls from his lawyer, his assistant, board members, journalists. He ignored them all, but he couldn't ignore the knock on his door Wednesday morning. "Elias, it's me." Mara's voice. He'd hoped for more time, a chance to explain before the world came crashing in. He opened the door. Mara stood on his porch, phone in her hand, screen showing an article with his photo, a photo from his old life, in a tuxedo at some gala, looking nothing like the quiet man she'd fallen for. "Is this you?" Her voice was very calm. Too calm. "Mara, is this you?" "Yes." She stared at him, and he watched her process it, the wealth, the fame, the lies by omission. Watched the trust in her eyes fracture. "You're Elias Ward, the tech billionaire, the one everyone's been looking for." I was. "Mara, please, let me explain. How long were you going to wait?" Her voice cracked. "When were you planning to tell me? After we'd been together a year? 2 years? Never?" "I wanted to tell you. I tried to find the right time. The right time was the beginning, Elias. The right time was when I told you about my ex, about how he made me feel small and insignificant and lied to by omission. When I told you about learning to trust again." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I shared everything with you. Everything. And you couldn't trust me with the truth? It wasn't about trust. Then what was it about? Shame? Did you think I'd want your money? Did you think I was some kind of gold digger who—" "No." Elias stepped forward, desperate. "Never. I thought you'd run. I thought if you knew who I was, what came with that, you'd realize this, us, wasn't worth the circus. The cameras, the judgment, the invasion. I wanted to protect what we had. By lying to me?" Mara wrapped her arms around herself. "You didn't protect us, Elias. You sabotaged us. Because how can I trust anything we built when it was built on a lie?" "Not a lie. I never lied to you. I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." Her voice rose, raw with pain. "You let me fall in love with you while hiding who you are. You let me be vulnerable and open and completely honest while you kept this massive secret. Do you have any idea how that feels?" "Yes." He did. It felt like betrayal. "Mara, please. I love you. Everything I told you, everything we shared, that was real, the truest thing in my life. But it wasn't the whole truth." She backed away, shaking her head. I need space. I can't do this right now. Mara, please." Her voice broke completely. "Please just let me go." She turned and walked away, and Elias watched her disappear down the street, feeling his world collapse for the second time in his life. The days that followed were agony. Millbrook descended into chaos. Reporters camped outside Elias's cottage. Cameras followed him everywhere. The quiet, invisible life he'd built shattered completely. Several times he considered leaving, returning to Manhattan, disappearing somewhere new, running again. But he couldn't, not while Mara was here, not while there was even a chance of making things right. He went to the cafe every morning at 7:30, hoping she'd appear. She never did. He walked past her apartment building, saw her lights on, wanted to knock but respected her request for space. He sent a single text, "I'm sorry, I love you. I'm here when you're ready to talk," and left it at that. Tom, the barista, eventually took pity on him. "She's hurting," he said one morning. "Mara doesn't trust easy. You broke something delicate." "I know. So fix it. If you really love her, find a way to fix it." "But how? How did you fix broken trust? How did you prove your feelings were real when the foundation had been cracked?" Elias spent a week thinking, writing, rewriting, trying to find words adequate to express everything in his heart. The fear that had made him hide, the love that made him want to stay, the desperate hope that she might forgive him. Finally, on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after their confrontation, Elias wrote a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter, handwritten on paper, the way important things used to be said. He poured everything into it, his past, his grief, his reasons for hiding, his love for her. He didn't make excuses, didn't ask for forgiveness, just laid himself bare and hoped it would be enough. He left it in her mailbox and walked away. Mara found the letter that evening after work. She'd been avoiding Elias, avoiding the cafe, avoiding anything that reminded her of the happiness that had turned out to be built on sand. The hurt was still raw, the betrayal still fresh, but she'd also spent 2 weeks thinking, remembering, processing. She remembered the lost look in Elias's eyes when they'd first met, the way he'd slowly come alive over the weeks they'd spent together, the genuine care he'd shown her, the respect, the gentleness, the way he'd held her like she was precious, made her feel worthy of love again. Had all of that been fake? Or had the feelings been real, even if the context was incomplete? Mara opened the letter with trembling hands. Dear Mara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I deserve forgiveness. But you deserve the complete truth, so I'm giving it to you now. Everything I should have said from the beginning. My name is Elias James Ward. 4 years ago, I was the CEO of Ward Technologies, a company I built from nothing into something the world noticed. I was married to a woman named Sarah who was brilliant and kind and made me believe I could be a good man. When she died, I lost more than my wife. I lost my sense of self, my purpose, my will to keep going. The world wanted me to grieve publicly, to be inspirational, to turn loss into profit. And I tried. For 2 years, I tried to be the man they expected. But I was drowning. So I ran. I came to Millbrook not to hide from the world, but to hide from the man I'd become. Hollow, performative, dead inside. And then I met you. You were the first real thing in years, Mara. The first person who saw me, just me, without the money or the name or the expectations. You made me remember what it felt like to be human, to laugh, to hope, to love. I didn't tell you who I was because I was terrified of losing what we had. Every day I meant to tell you. Every day I talked myself out of it, convinced that the truth would destroy the one beautiful thing I'd found in the wreckage of my life. I was selfish. I was scared. I was wrong. You told me once that you came to Millbrook to remember you were strong and soft. Well, you taught me that I could be both too, strong enough to face my grief, soft enough to let someone in. You gave me back my life, Mara. You gave me back myself. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm not asking you to forgive me for breaking your trust. I'm just asking you to know this. Every moment with you was real. Every word I said was true. Every feeling I had was honest. I love you with a fullness I didn't think I'd ever feel again. If you decide you're done with me, I'll understand. I'll respect it. I'll leave Millbrook and let you have your peace back. But if there's any chance, any hope at all, that we could rebuild what I broke, I'm here. I'm not running anymore. I'm staying, and I'm fighting for us, if you'll let me. You once bought me a coffee when I forgot my wallet. You said it was just a small kindness, but that small kindness led to everything. So maybe, if you can find it in your heart, you could give me one more small kindness. One more chance to prove that my love for you is the truest thing about me. I'll be at our bench by the lake every morning at sunrise. If you come, I'll know we have a chance. If you don't, I'll know to let you go. Forever yours, even if you can't be mine. Elias. Mara read it 3 times, tears streaming freely. She could feel his pain in every word, his regret, his love. And beneath her hurt, beneath the betrayal, she felt something else stirring. Understanding. Because hadn't she also come to Millbrook running from something? Hadn't she also hidden parts of herself that protected her heart, built walls to keep from being hurt again? Elias's walls had just been higher, bigger, more public. He'd been wrong not to tell her, wrong to let the lie persist. But he'd also been honest about everything that mattered, his feelings, his grief, his healing. The man she'd fallen in love with was real. The wealth and fame were just context. Complicated, invasive context, but context nonetheless. Could she forgive him? Could she trust him again? Mara didn't know, but she knew she wanted to try. The next morning before dawn, Mara walked to the lake. The sky was just beginning to lighten, stars fading into soft blue. And there on their bench sat Elias. He looked different, thinner, more tired. But when he saw her approaching, his whole face transformed with hope and fear and desperate love. Mara sat beside him, not too close, maintaining space between them. They sat in silence, watching the sun begin to rise over the water. I'm still hurt, Mara said finally. I'm still angry. You broke my trust, Elias, and that's not something that heals overnight. I know. But I also understand why you did it, and I believe that your feelings for me were real. She turned to look at him. I've spent 2 weeks trying to hate you, trying to convince myself that everything we had was fake. But I can't. Because I know you, Elias. The real you. The man who came back to life over coffee and morning walks. That man was real. He was. He is. Elias's voice was rough with emotion. Mara, I swear to you, I will never hide anything from you again. No more secrets, no more omissions. Complete honesty even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's all I'm asking for. Mara reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining the way they had so many times before. I don't care about your money, Elias. I don't care about your name or your company or any of that, but I care about you being honest with me, about trusting me enough to handle the truth. I do trust you. I trust you more than anyone. He squeezed her hand. I was just too scared to trust myself. Scared I didn't deserve happiness again. Scared that if I reached for it, it would burn away like everything else I've loved. I can't promise I won't burn away, Mara said softly. Life doesn't come with guarantees. But I can promise that if you let me in, really in, with all the truth and all the mess, I'll do everything I can to stay, to build something real with you. That's all I want. That's everything I want. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, warming their faces, burning away the morning mist. There was still hurt to heal, trust to rebuild, conversations to have about what a future together might look like when one of them was famous and the other just wanted peace. But they had time. They had honesty. They had love that had survived secrets and pain and the harsh light of truth. So what now? Elias asked eventually. Mara smiled, that warm, radiant smile that had first cracked the ice around his heart. Now we start over. But this time we start with the whole truth. I'm Elias James Ward, he said formally. I'm a widower, a former CEO, and a billionaire who ran away from his life and found it again in a small town. I'm terrified of losing you. I'm learning to forgive myself for surviving when my wife didn't, and I'm completely, irreversibly in love with you. I'm Mara Elizabeth Hayes, she replied. I'm a graphic designer, a painter, and a woman who came to Millbrook to remember her worth. I'm still learning to trust again. I'm learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. And I'm in love with a man who helped me remember how to be soft and strong at the same time. Nice to meet you, Mara Elizabeth Hayes. Nice to meet you too, Elias James Ward. They laughed, and the sound was full of relief and hope and new beginnings. Elias pulled her closer, and Mara let herself lean into him, her head resting on his shoulder as the sun continued its climb. 3 months later, Mara and Elias sat at their table in morning brew, morning coffee between them, comfortable silence wrapping around them like a blanket. The media frenzy had died down. Reporters had moved on to other stories. Millbrook had returned to its quiet rhythms. Elias had started working again, consulting remotely, using his expertise to help small businesses and nonprofits, finding purpose without the pressure. Mara had gotten a commission for a series of paintings celebrating small-town life. They'd found a rhythm that honored both their need for peace and their individual callings. I was thinking, Elias said, tracing circles on the back of Mara's hand, maybe we should buy that house by the lake, the one with the studio space. Are you asking me to move in with you, Elias Ward? I'm asking if you want to build a life together, somewhere beautiful and quiet, somewhere we can both heal and grow and be ourselves. Mara pretended to think about it, though her smile gave her away. Will there be room for my painting supplies? An entire studio, windows facing the lake, perfect light. And a garden? Whatever you want. Everything you want. Then yes. Mara leaned forward and kissed him softly. Let's build a life together. As they left the cafe hand in hand, Tom called out, Same time tomorrow? Same time tomorrow, they answered in unison and meant it. Because some rituals were worth keeping. Some coffee dates led to love. Some second chances turned into forever. And sometimes, when you stopped running from your life, you discovered that what you were really running toward was standing right in front of you, offering a warm smile and a small kindness that changed everything. Elias had come to Millbrook looking for silence. Instead, he'd found a voice that called him back to life. Mara had come looking for peace. Instead, she'd found a love that honored all the pieces of herself. Together, they'd learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or hiding from it. It was about having the courage to be honest, to be vulnerable, to let someone carry the weight with you. It was about second chances, the kind that don't erase what came before, but honor it by leading you towards something beautiful and unexpected and real. The kind that starts with something as simple as a cup of coffee. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to see more stories about love, healing, and second chances. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a second chance at happiness? And don't forget to like this video to help others find this story. Thank you for spending these moments with us.